I'm Barbara Peters. Welcome to another episode of the Criminal Calendar. We have with us today Gregg Hurwitz from Los Angeles, whose email domain I was just asking about, roadrunner.com, indicates that he has had, at least at some time in his life, a connection with Time Warner, now called
Grand Central.
Isn't that strange? What was it that prompted that?
I don't have the faintest idea.
I think it had to do with the sale of the company. But, you know, isn't that true? I bring this up because you've had kind of an interesting career in publishing in the sense of multiple publishers.
Yeah.
But even if you hadn't, publishers can change their name on you. And,
oh, absolutely. I mean, nothing's the same year to year. I mean, I started with Simon & Schuster. I was HarperCollins, then William Morrow, division of Harper, and then finally wound up at Viking. So, I mean, I've been bouncing around, as you know.
But even if you weren't bouncing around, they are.
Well, that's what happened to me at Harper. I was with, what was it called? Cliff Street Books, I want to say.
Was it?
Diane Reverend's imprint.
I can't even remember that.
Yeah, and that was mine, and it dissolved, and all of a sudden I was with another. It was a newly named division of the publishing house.
Sort of like the Judith Rican authors who one day discovered. I forgot to ask myself, I was going to check, because that thing blew up over the O.J. book, and then I think the family of Ronald Goldman bought the rights to the book from
they were awarded the rights by a judge.
Was that it?
For
and
resale.
They've done some disposition of it, I think, and I heard a snatch of it today, but I forgot to listen to it.
Oh, really?
I was busy, yeah. And I was interested to see whether principle was going to triumph over money.
I think they're going to resell it and get the money, is my guess.
Well, it'll be interesting to find out. But I mean, publishing in many ways has taken on kind of a tabloid aspect. Maybe it always has had it, and I'm just being naive here.
We're just catching up to the trend now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably I'm still thinking of the great Scribner editors and Thomas Wolfe and thinking it's all literary, when in fact it's just a business to make money, right? Like others.
Absolutely.
So, in your interesting career, which began with the Tower in 1999, how has it felt to you to change? I mean, is your writing affected by these transitions into different houses, different editors? Or have you sort of been your own thing and you just sort of slough it off?
Well, I've progressed through perhaps a stupid approach, which is like I write the things that are the most of interest to me, and I focus completely on those, and then I try and figure out after the fact what publisher would be a match for it. And I think perhaps if I was wiser, I would do the reverse and figure out the house and the editor and what would please them, and then write to that end. So, I mean, the crime writer is obviously a departure for me in a number of different ways, and we ended up finding a publishing house that sparked to it and was better suited to it, perhaps. So.
Well, I'm not sure that you, knowing you as I do, and the maverick nature that you have, would be able, in fact, to write a book sort of to order rather than to write your own book. And that's a terrible dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it certainly is a more tricky one. But it's interesting because people say that a lot when they talk about, you know, when they're reviewing a book that they don't think is very good, and they'll get very bitter and say it's on the New York Times bestseller list, or they'll look at a screenwriter who's terrible who keeps getting produced. And the thing I always say is, well, you know, generally to the person, if they're a more talented writer, you say, well, you can't write that way. But it's not necessarily a compliment. I mean, there is actually a skill set to write in a way that is accessible in certain ways, or that is lowest common denominator, if that's a style that somebody writes that is a specific skill set. And it's like you have that or you don't. And it's not necessarily how I approach my books, and I don't say it from any snotty or superior perspective. It is literally, I wouldn't know how to write a book that is sort of made to order for what a particular house's marketing needs are. It's for me, it's always in the reverse. And it doesn't mean that I don't take input and I don't take notes and that I don't think that the business side of marketing is extraordinarily important, because it all is. It's just, it's a different way of approaching something, and some people are great at it. They say, you know, my editor pitched me a series with X, Y, Z, and so this is what I worked on. I came up with a treatment, we were all happy, and I moved forward. And my brain doesn't work that way.
Well, I certainly have noticed, for example, in the prevalent target marketing, niche marketing for cozies, for example, innocent readers think that, you know, this new series about the cat drinking chocolate or whatever is a brand new author. But in fact, I know that this is sort of, in a way, like the old Stratemeyer Syndicate, you know, where it looked as though one person, Carolyn Keene, was writing Nancy Drew, but in fact these books were written by multiple authors. Well, a lot of them were written by the same person, but some were written on commission. By other authors. And that's a lot of what's going on in publishing today, but readers don't really see it. is that you're getting maybe 3 books about a knitting club or 5 books about a coffee house or something in this genre.
A cupcake, a murderous cupcake.
Well, and actually some of them are fine. I mean, I'm not trying to put them down, but what I do know is that if it doesn't work, the author simply assumes a new name.
Right.
And because the name branding thing has become so important.
Absolutely.
And off they go doing. So these are definitely people able to write on commission, so to speak.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple decisions. I mean, some people I think have made smart decisions if they're writing a book and they write one that just completely doesn't match. I mean, Anne Rice did that. She did a pen name for her erotica, and then she folded it back in. I mean, but you're right. There's some people where, you know, the notion in the kernel that the book arises from is sort of come up with between publisher. It's almost like a packaged product, and they can figure out that they can write really well at that end.
How about the ghostwriting thing that's so hot at the moment? Could you imagine yourself doing, I mean, I read the other day there's an agency that its entire stable of authors are ghostwriters. That's all they do.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not of interest to me right now, but I mean, you know, it's not something that I would see myself doing. But
maybe
it's also
you could get caught up in somebody's life. I was thinking about Larry Shames, who I always thought was an interesting author, did a lot of good work of his own, and then he got terribly caught up in the life of this guy that was dying of cancer, who wanted to tell his story.
Wow.
And Larry, it wasn't a ghost-written thing though; it was a co-authored deal where
like a biography and autobiography.
And that's a real interesting distinction, because when both people's name is on the work, you know, then it becomes, I think, a genuine co-authorship. Ghostwriting generally, to me, implies that the actual author of the work is secret, it's cloaked.
Right, right. Well, I mean, you look at James Patterson with some of his books, it's got, you know, there's 2 names on the cover. And I think he lends his marketing savvy and his story sense and structure to it, and somebody else is also doing it, and it's right there on the cover. I mean, it's not, they're not claiming that Patterson is writing them, every single word in them, but you sort of understand that it has his stamp and his, you know, his aesthetic and his marketing muscle, and then they put somebody else in and he works with them together, but it's all right out there. But it doesn't bother people because they know he sort of has overseen it and it's gotten his stamp of approval.
It's a brand. They've created essentially a brand. But I did an interesting program recently with Michael Robotham, who's you may have run into him by now. He's an Australian author.
Suspect. And,
yeah, Lost and The Suspect, and then he has this corker of a new book, and of course, in a senior moment, I'm forgetting that. I'll come back. I loved it.
It's not a one-word title. Is why you can't remember it as well, because the first 2 are Suspect and Lost, I think, and then.
Is that how my aging brain is going?
Well, that's how my brain goes, because I'm trying to recall it too. So maybe it's how my aging brain is working.
Well, in any case, what I learned is that his writing career has embraced doing ghostwriting for a lot of celebrity authors, and he was not at liberty by contract to acknowledge, you know, them. But I could see that now that he's written a couple of books of his own, that he had found that irksome, and he really didn't like the idea of going forward writing a book that didn't have his name, you know, getting credit on it. And I think that maybe even in a ghostwriting career, there will come a point in which you would want to be visible.
Right.
You know,
right. Well, that's happened, hasn't it? Where people who are ghostwriters, you know, becomes more of a public row. They come out there.
Michael Gruber is an interesting example. Yeah, it was somebody who, you know, wrote a lot of books for somebody else and then stepped forward and has now written 4 or 5 of his own. I think there was a lot more of that going on in the past than was ever acknowledged. You know, we tend to think that the world is new and this is all whatever.